I like nostalgia.
Coming soon.
Hi, I'm Cole.
You like nostalgia.
In colorful pages.
Everyone loves nostalgia. That's kind of how it works. Remembering simpler days when our brains weren't fully formed and we weren't exposed to the world's cruelness. Waking up on Sunday mornings in December to my dad watching football and my mom baking cookies while listening to a Charlie Brown Christmas album. Coming home from elementary school to watch Cyber Chase at 4:30 on PBS Kids. Spending weekends with cousins at my grandparents' house. The problem with that kind of nostalgia is that it's difficult to relive. I can't recreate those moments on account of the constant progression of time. Looking at old photo albums or watching home movies often serves as the best window into simpler days. For me, and I'm sure countless others, video games serve a similar purpose. At risk of sounding like a degenerate consumer, as a child, video games were an integral part of my identity. I can point to a game and tell you a dozen memories I have from it, reflecting the point in my life I was at. But when compared to other media, video games are harder to engage with after the fact. Old books, TV shows, and films are easy to find, whether they be on some digital platform or 123movies.com. Video games, on the other hand, have a limited shelf life and require necessary hardware to play them on. That relative elusiveness, as what kind of weirdo holds on to every video game they've ever played, combined with the interactive nature of the medium, at least for me, creates a more vivid nostalgic experience. And the granddaddy of nostalgic video games is none other than Paper Mario. Released in North America on February 5th, 2001, and originally intended as a sequel to Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars on the Super Nintendo, it would go on to create a series with one of the most opinionated fan bases out there, myself included. This video is gonna be one of those retrospective video essays you see a lot. You know, the hour-long type beat. My goal here is to reconcile the Paper Mario I played as a child with the Paper Mario that exists objectively. To facilitate this, I watched, and occasionally assisted, my girlfriend as she played through the game for the first time. By doing this, watching a blind playthrough from someone who barely plays video games, I was able to remove myself from the knowledge of the game that I have, experiencing, as best I could, Paper Mario for the first time once again. The story Paper Mario tells is fairly straightforward. Bowser stole the Star Rod, sealed away the 7 Star Spirits, kidnapped Peach's entire castle, and all but killed Mario. Mario must save the Star Spirits, beat Bowser, and rescue Princess Peach. Yeah, I think I've seen this one before. The game splits this story into a prologue and 8 chapters. The prologue is basically one extended tutorial. The first 7 chapters see Mario rescuing the Star Spirits, while the 8th is Mario's infiltration of Bowser's castle and subsequent showdown with the Koopa King. This chapter system, combined with the generally simplistic story, results in an accessible narrative. Each chapter is unique and all but removed from one another. As a result, the chapters serve as story arcs, which in turn creates a pacing with natural ebbs and flows. Having each chapter only be a few hours long allows them to be comfortably beaten in one sitting. Never do any of these chapters drag on. Most importantly, however, this formula doesn't get stale. When you have 7 chapters with the exact same goal, rescuing a Star Spirit, you might expect to get into a repetitive gameplay loop by the 4th or 5th chapter. Go to a new town, help them out, find a dungeon, beat a boss, save the Star Spirit, go back to the hub world. Rinse and repeat 7 times. The game seemingly knows that this would be the expected narrative pace and subverts its own formula almost as much as it follows it. Chapter 1, Storming Koopa Bros Fortress, follows that formula, but hey, it's the first chapter, you need to ease players in. And that's exactly what it does. A quick stroll down Pleasant Path leads to Koopa Village, where you find fuzzies have taken over. After playing a quick memory game, Koopa joins your party, proving Merlin's fortune correct. Using Koopa's ability, you make it to Koopa Bros Fortress, its dark, gloomy presence at odds with the warm, inviting nature of both Pleasant Path and Koopa Village. Eventually, you beat the Koopa Bros, save the Star Spirit, then return to Toad Town. Chapter 2, The Mystery of Dry Dry Ruins, steps things up a bit. The formula is still here. Find a town, help the townsfolk, complete a dungeon, beat a boss, but the trek to Dry Dry Outpost is a much more arduous one. You have to cross Mount Rugged, assisting Parakarry along the way to do so. Afterwards, you still have to cross the blistering heat of Dry Dry Desert, dodging bandits and pokies and discovering the many secrets that lie in these sands. Once you reach Dry Dry Outpost, you have to figure out how to find Moustafa, with the very vague hint being that Sheik, your main source of information, loves lemons. You once more return to the desert, as everyone in town keeps speaking about its mysteries and wonders. Stumbling across an oasis, you acquire a lemon, bring it to Sheik, who tells you to buy a dried shroom followed by a dusty hammer. After doing that, you learn that Sheik had been Moustafa the entire time. He gives you the pulse stone and sends you back to the desert to find Dry Dry Ruins. Spirit's. From there, you complete the dungeon, beat the boss, save the Star Spirit, and return to Toad Town, but already by Chapter 2, the game has ramped up the scope of your adventure. Dry Desert has 49 screens, and while only a few have anything worthwhile, you still feel like an adventurer exploring the desolate sands. Chapter 3, The Invincible Tubba Blubba, begins to subvert the formula by having the Star Spirit escaping from Tubba Blubba, only to be captured by Lady Bo. Of course, she'll give you the Star Spirit if you beat Tubba Blubba, but only because he's been eating ghosts. Chapters 4 and 6 forego a dungeon at all, instead having Shy Guy's Toy Box and Flower Fields, respectively, be their own gauntlet of battles and puzzles. And chapters 5 and 7 use the aforementioned formula as well, but because they're separated by more distinct chapters and both have memorable segments to them, saving baby Yoshis and solving a penguin murder mystery, things don't get stale. In between every chapter, you get to play as Princess Peach in a short interlude. During these, we see what Bowser's up to and get to explore Peach's castle. These interludes are some of the more memorable parts of Paper Mario, and the goal of each one, obtaining information on where the next Star Spirit is being held, is reached via different means every time. You'll stumble across Bowser's diary, engage in some soft stealth action, aid Bowser's schemes by telling him Mario's greatest weakness, soda water.
How about some soda, guys?
Yes, please. Thanks, friend.
Bake a cake, play a quiz show, and impersonate guards. Accompanying her on these endeavors is the Star Kid, Twink. Yes, that's really his name. Twink then relays the information he and Peach have acquired to Mario. Being able to play as Princess Peach subverts the standard affair of her being kidnapped by Bowser. She assists Mario throughout his entire adventure, gathering information for Twink to give him, and generally just doing her best given the circumstances. She can find badges and items and send them to Mario via the mysterious treasure chest. Think the item boxes in Resident Evil. Naturally, this begs the question of why Peach doesn't just hop in the mysterious treasure chest, but I digress. Narratively, upon just expanding Peach's character and building up Bowser as this terrifying yet oddly moronic king of the Koopas, the interludes establish the next area Mario will venture off to. Whether it be learning about Dry ruins from Bowser's diary or Flower Fields from a quiz show, the game almost always sets up expectations of what will come in a way that makes the payout feel rewarding. Keyword almost. We'll come back to this. Because every chapter is so far removed from one another, there needs to be some context that allows for the player to naturally go on to the next. These Peach interludes offer that context. As a result of the player immediately knowing where it is they need to go next, there's never an instance where the player gets railroaded. After each chapter, you can take as much time as you want before continuing to the next one. You're also always free to return to anywhere you've previously been whenever you want. It might be slow before you unlock the warp pipes, this game's fast travel, but you're never gated out of an area. There is no rush to this game whatsoever, and the narrative successfully allows this. And if you ever forget where you need to go, just ask Merlin, and he'll send you down the right path. Once all 7 Star Spirits have been rescued, Mario goes up to Star Haven, where the Star Spirits give him the Star Beam, the only thing that can counter Bowser's Star Rod. They then give Mario the Starship, which allows him to go to Bowser's castle. This final chapter is just one long dungeon. You start at the bottom of Bowser's castle and work your way up. You'll be solving puzzles requiring every tool in your arsenal, fighting the toughest enemies in the game, and even doing a little quiz show. Eventually, you reach the eerily quiet Peach's castle, make your way up to where Bowser beat you back in the prologue, and kick his ass this time. He flees, of course, because what final boss only has one phase, and you ascend to the power platform, some contrived contraption Kammy Koopa has made that increases Bowser's power. Bowser has become so strong that the Star Beam no longer works, and after playing a short cutscene battle with Peach and Twink, the Star Beam is upgraded to the Peach Beam, and Mario proceeds to beat Bowser. The Star Spirits carefully lower Peach's castle back to the ground, and Mario and co have a party at the castle. Then the credits roll to a very endearing parade. The overarching narrative, being as simple as it is, provides enough leniency that ensures everywhere you go and everything you do is as interesting as possible. You're never bogged down by endless cutscenes, save for maybe the prologue, because much of the game's emphasis is on the smaller scenarios that exist within this plot. Paper Mario, like most RPGs, is broken up into 2 sections, the overworld and combat. But instead of running around static fields and fighting random encounters, you're platforming and solving puzzles. This isn't an RPG with Mario in it, this is a Mario game with a turn-based battle system. Your progression isn't marked just by leveling up, but by having new partners join and finding permanent upgrades to Mario's boots and hammer. In that regard, it has elements of an action-adventure game like Zelda. You know, you get the thing so you can go back and get the other thing. Whether it be the super boots that let you break through through wooden planks and find secret star pieces, or the super hammer that lets you break stone blocks, every time you return to Toad Town at the end of a chapter, there's something more you can uncover. Fortunately, there's rarely any extreme backtracking when it comes to this. The worst you'll find is this stone block by Goomba Village that hides a repel gel and a few star pieces. Most of the newly accessible goodies are either in Toad Town or its sewer, or on the way back to Toad Town after completing a chapter, such as the super block in Mount Rugged. A couple of these upgrades are found within chapter dungeons. These super and ultra hammers are obtained in Dry Ruins and Mount Lavalava, respectively. In that regard, some parallels can be made between those dungeons and the dungeons found in your typical Zelda game. You find the item halfway through, then use it to access areas you otherwise couldn't reach. Hell, you get Bombette halfway through Koopa Bro's fortress, making her something of a dungeon item. Your partners not only assist you in combat, but serve a purpose on the field, allowing you to interact with the world in new ways. Bo hides you from enemies, Paracarry lifts you across gaps, Koopa lets you grab and hit normally unreachable objects. Once more breaking the formulaic structure that would presumably plague a game like this, every chapter has the player doing something unique. You are constantly engaging with some facet of the world in interesting ways, and most importantly, never reusing these elements. Chapter 1 has the Fuzzy minigame, a quite literal shell game where you have to find the Fuzzy holding Koopa's shell. Chapter 2 has the Lemon side quest and finding Dry Ruins with the Pulse Stone, basically one big game of hot and cold. Chapter 3 has the Forever Forest, where you have to discern what path looks different to progress. This chapter also features Boo's Mansion, which stands out as it's the only dungeon in the game that relies entirely on puzzles. You have to find a portrait to put in this talking picture frame, which involves solving several puzzles along the way, as well as playing 2 memory games with Boos and playing a phonograph in time. Chapter 4 has you running in and out of Shy Guy's toy box, enlisting the help of several toads to actually complete the chapter. Chapter 5 has you rescue the Fearsome Five, a group of baby Yoshis, and sees Professor Colorado join Mario in his expedition of this chapter's dungeon, Mount Lavalava. Chapter 6 has you run back and forth across flower fields, assisting these bizarre characters in their relatively mundane tasks. This chapter is also unique because right from the start you know exactly what you have to do to reach Huffin, the chapter boss. From the get-go, you're told you'll need to acquire a magical bean, some miracle water, some fertile soil, as well as destroy the Puff machine to return the sun to the sky in order to grow a beanstalk to reach Huffin on the cloudy climb. Chapter 7 has the Penguin murder mystery. Mario gets charged with the murder of Mayor Penguin, a crime he didn't commit, and has to clear his name by finding the #1 suspect, famed mystery novelist Herringway, only for it to turn out Mayor Penguin just bonked his head while getting a box off the shelf and didn't die in the first place. The entire endeavor goes to show the dangers of mob mentality and the effect that fake news can have on society. Every penguin immediately cancels Mario with no evidence, and after Mario proves his innocence, they all go, "Oops, haha, sorry about that." Bro, these penguins have no critical thinking and absolutely zero media literacy. Don't trust the mayor's wife, she's just doing this for attention. And Chapter 8 has this memory quiz show, which really comes out of left field. You have to watch various enemies run around and then answer a question based on what you just saw. The chapter dungeons and the puzzles you solve in them aren't terribly complicated, mainly on account of this being a children's video game. Most of them are solved by just using the correct partner or triggering an event in one room that lets you progress through a second. Regardless, here are a couple puzzles I think are noteworthy. The main gimmick in Dry Ruins is locating these 3 stones and finding the correct order to place them in. I love this because you receive zero guidance on the matter. You're initially shown these stone blocks you can't break with a regular hammer, which obviously sparks intrigue once you obtain the super hammer. From there, you acquire these 3 stones, discover this odd mural, and connect the dots on your own. The Crystal Palace's gimmick is mirrors and how altering one side affects the other. This culminates in the albino dino room, where you can only move these statues in the direction the albino dinos are looking. At first, it looks like everything resets when you leave the room, but then you realize there's no mirror, and you can freely cross between the 2 halves. Then there's this puzzle in Bowser's Castle where you need to find the correct path through these repeating rooms. The solution? Just follow the pattern from these torches. Really, I adore the game's dungeons and puzzles because at points they do feel like baby's first Zelda game. Running through the game's environments is also enjoyable. I've neglected to mention it so far, but the aesthetic of this game is incredible. Mixing sprite-based characters with 3D backgrounds creates a timeless look to the game. Compare this to most other Nintendo 64 games and you'll find, visually, it has aged much nicer than most. The violet mountainside of Shooting Star Summit, the blistering heat of Dry Desert, the eeriness of Boo's Mansion, the verdant flora of Jade Jungle, exploring these areas is always a blast. In part because everywhere you go is so unique that you don't get bored of any one type of environment. There aren't dozens of grassy routes or mountains. Every chapter has a fresh look to it. And of course, everywhere you go, there are secrets to be found. You'll find star pieces, letters, badges, super blocks, and items at every turn if you know where to look. Now, running isn't exactly the fastest way to move, and when you're a min-maxing psychopath like myself, you'll move as optimally as possible all the time. What this entails is not just using Mario's spin dash, no relation, but jumping out of it at the end to maintain momentum. Because if you don't, then Mario comes to a hole and it's just not efficient. You gotta be jumping out of the spin dash all the time. Even the way you progress to the next chapter is done differently every time. Once Twink tells you where to go next, it's up to you to figure out how to get there. You'll blow up some debris to get a train moving again, hide to find the hidden entrance to Shy Guy's toy box, and help a whale's tummy ache. The two most interesting manners of progression happen in chapters 3 and 6, however. As you explore the newly accessible parts of Toad Town after chapter 1, you'll likely stumble across the dark, ominous Forever Forest. You might even go in just to see what's there. However, after fighting, and maybe dying to, enemies that are just a little too strong for you, you'll probably decide to come back later. Then, after beating chapter 2, you learn the next star spirit is somewhere past Forever Forest. But hey, you already know where that is. I love that you can just stumble across Forever Forest before you have to go there. It's the only time something like this happens, and I think it's really neat. Of course, Twink never actually tells Mario that he needs to go to Forever Forest. The player just knows it because they were told that during the Peach interlude, which kind of breaks the immersion between player knowledge and character knowledge, but who cares actually, so. Then to enter Flower Fields in chapter 6, you need to plant 4 magical seeds obtained from Bulbs. Now, the trick here is that the 4 magical seeds are all over the Mushroom Kingdom. There's one in Toad Town, one on Mount Rugged, one in Forever Forest, and one on Lavalava Island. Now, if you've been scouring everywhere you go, you likely already have the 4 seeds and have been wondering what their purpose is. If you haven't, well, you'd better go back and get them. I think it's so cool that your progression to chapter 6 is based upon exploration of previous chapters. Of course, if you have to backtrack to these previous areas because you didn't get the magical seeds, I could imagine it being pretty frustrating. This game is always having you do something different, whether that be meeting new characters, going to new locations, solving unique scenarios, or further exploring elements of previous areas. The gameplay is so engaging because of how varied everything is. Now, what's an RPG without some turn-based combat? Naturally, as you run about the world, you'll encounter some enemies. Where Paper Mario immediately has a leg up on other RPGs, however, is that there are no random encounters. Instead, you get to see every enemy on the field. This makes the inevitable backtracking much more bearable, as with skill you can dodge every encounter. Battles are turn-based and you fight with Mario and his 8 partners. They all have different moves, but only one can be out at a time, and it takes a turn to switch them. The main gimmick with this battle system is action commands. Every attack you do requires a quick little input to be performed successfully. Pressing A before a jump, holding back the control stick to strike with your hammer, mashing A to charge Bombette's explosion. Battles require not just good strategy, but proper execution. Mario has heart points and flower points, representing health and essentially magic. Leveling up is streamlined, so you just need 100 star points per level. Using a fancy algorithm, enemies are worth less star points the higher your level, and eventually don't award any. This creates a tangible way to show that Mario has become so strong he's not gaining anything by fighting weak enemies. Upon leveling up, you can increase Mario's heart points, flower points, or badge points. You don't gain any additional attack or defense by leveling up. Hell, the only gear Mario has is his boots and hammer. You won't be upgrading his armor or buying new weapons every time you enter a new town. As a result, whenever you acquire a new set of boots or upgrade your party member, it's a big deal. And that leads into what I think is the coolest part about Paper Mario's combat. You don't really become better at fighting by just having the bigger numbers, you do so by learning how your enemies fight. Almost every enemy has a gimmick to the way you engage them, whether that be hammering spiked enemies, jumping on flying enemies, using Bo to avoid powerful attacks, flipping over Koopas, using Watt to pierce defense, Sushi to douse fire enemies, or Kooper's fire show to ignite frozen enemies. There is an effective strategy for everything you fight. By properly planning your attacks, you can end the battle with very little damage being sustained. And as you fight the same enemy more and more, you learn not just these strategies, but the timings for their attacks, so you take less damage. You, the player, literally gain experience when fighting new enemies, much in the same way you gain experience in a typical Mario platformer. Instead of idly mashing through random encounters, you need to always be thinking. And this thinking is pretty easy to do, on account of the relatively small numbers this game deals with. Your max HP is 50, your most powerful hammer only does 6 damage, enemies' attacks rarely do more than 5 damage, defense is easily calculated by subtracting 1 point of damage for each point of defense. There's no speed, magic defense, magic attack, or any other stats to keep track of other than HP, attack, and defense. Your partners are upgraded by way of super blocks. Initially, they can only be upgraded once, but when Raphael the Raven gives you the Ultra Stone in Chapter 5, they can be upgraded a second time, providing new attacks and higher damage with each upgrade. The Star Spirits also help Mario on his journey. For each Star Spirit that you save, your star energy increases by 1 and you acquire a new special move to use. These range from healing Mario to making enemies fall asleep to just damaging them. The other thing that makes Paper Mario's combat stand out from other RPGs to me is the badge system. You equip a badge and gain some new attack or effect. Every badge costs a number of badge points, and you can make some pretty fun builds with them. Do more damage with Mario's attack, put enemies to sleep, have enemies miss sometimes, spin faster and farther, make Mario's attack sound silly. There's a lot of possibilities here. The bosses you fight, like with the regular enemies, all have pretty interesting mechanics, with there being a puzzle element of how to effectively fight them. Typically, the solution is to simply use the partner you've just acquired, but once again, this is a children's video game. The Koopa Bros' special attack hits pretty hard, but they're rendered useless after Bombette blows them up. Tubba Blubba's heart will do massive damage unless you avoid it using bows out of sight. Lava Piranha's second phase is pretty difficult unless you douse it with Sushi's tidal wave. One recurring boss you fight throughout the entire game is Junior Troopa, this crazy little kid who wants to beat Mario. First encountered in Goomba Village, you fight him in Pleasant Path, Forever Forest, Toad Town Harbor, Shiver Snowfield, and finally Bowser's Castle. You always fight him when you least expect it, on account of the battles happening about every other chapter. And then the final boss, Bowser, is a true test to what you've learned throughout your adventures. The only gimmick he has is that every few turns he uses the Star Rod to go sicko mode, and you have to counter it with the Peach Beam. Otherwise, he's just a strong boss who hits hard and has a lot of HP. It's a real battle of attrition as you chip away his health. Sure, it might be a little bland when compared to other boss fights in the game, but I like that you can pretty much use whatever partner you want, whereas other bosses basically necessitated certain partners. Might it have been cool if you had different phases that needed a certain partner to efficiently deal with him? Yeah, but a true test of strength makes for a fitting final boss. The main strategy you have to use is don't die. All that being said, this game is kinda challenging. My girlfriend died in both Koopa Bros Fortress and Dry Dry Ruins, and Huffin killed her a few times. The thing that really sucks about dying is that you go back to your last save. I wouldn't mind being kicked back to the last town you visited and having to venture back to where you died, but losing all your star points is cruel. Because there's no penalty for saving every time you beat a fight, you shouldn't lose all your unsaved progress due to a death. Maybe I'm speaking with the benefit of 20 years retrospection, but my girlfriend's death in Koopa Bros Fortress and Dry Dry Ruins were justifiably frustrating to her. Apart from the main story, there's plenty of stuff to do on the side. Optional bosses, side quests, collectibles, enough to make every trip back to Toad Town an opportunity to explore the world more. One of the first optional bosses you'll encounter is Buzzer on Mount Rugged. You encounter him after Parakarry joins the party, and he serves as a little introduction as to how Parakarry can make short work of aerial enemies. However, simply tell him that you're actually Luigi, not Mario, and he'll let you pass through no problem. Tell him you're Princess Peach, and, well, he's not that stupid, and you'll have to fight him regardless. In Chapter 4, you have the option to fight this anti-guy guarding a treasure chest. He's kinda dummy strong for how early you encounter him, but if you're a gamer like me, he's no problem. You can also give him a lemon candy and he'll just give you the treasure, but I don't have footage of that, so enjoy my artist's rendition of what I imagine happens. Once you beat Chapter 5, blocking Pleasant Path is Kent-C Koopa, who demands 100 coins to use the road. You can fight him naturally, and he can actually be kinda hard unless you cheese it like I did. In Toad Town Tunnels, you can fight both the Electro and Super Bloopers. They both block parts of the sewer, and while not that hard, it's fun how your progression in this area is locked behind your ability to beat a boss, as you typically fight a boss after exploring an area. The last optional boss, or bosses rather, come from the Toad Town Dojo. Here, Mario puts his battling prowess to the test, fighting both Chan and Lee, students of the dojo, and the Master. The Master is fought 3 times, each progressively more difficult, with the last encounter being a harder fight than the final boss. Your only reward for beating these fights are degrees, with the ultimate prize being a diploma. Really, it just amounts to bragging rights, but the type of person who wants bragging rights is the type of person who'll enjoy this kind of stuff. After Parakarry joins the party in Chapter 2, you can start delivering letters you find to NPCs across the Mushroom Kingdom. Typically, the reward for delivering a letter is a star piece, but after an extremely long chain of letters, you're rewarded with Lucky Day, a pretty strong badge. For the most part, finding a letter is effectively 1/2 of a star piece, but the entire mechanic is cute and fleshes out the world. The star pieces, which you acquire through delivering letters, hitting trees, finding hidden panels, answering Chuck Quizmo's questions, and other exploration, can be traded to Merlot for badges at Shooting Star Summit. In Koopa Village, you can assist the elderly Koopa Coot with his seemingly endless errands. You'll find his wallet, go all the way to Shooting Star Summit for Merlovely's autograph, go to Shy Guy's toy box for Cake Mix to make him a kooky cookie, and have to just figure out the last item to buy in a sequence. There's 20 in total, and while the reward for most of them is just 1 coin, he ends up giving you 15 star pieces in both the silver and gold credits, which unlocks the minigames at the Toad Town Playroom. The Playroom, hidden away near the railroad in Toad Town, presumably due to the strict gambling laws in the Mushroom Kingdom, has 2 minigames to play, Jump Attack and Smash Attack. Jump attack costs 10 coins and has you hitting blocks, trying to avoid the Bowser panels. Hit one of those and you lose. You choose to hit either 5, 7, or 9 blocks. If you win the 9 block game, your winnings are doubled. I found this right here to be the best way to grind coins, as once you get lucky in the 9 block game, you just win like 500 coins. And, because this isn't real life, you can always just reset the console to undo a bad losing streak. Smash attack also costs 10 coins, and sees you hammering the 10 Princess Peach panels within 30 seconds, while avoiding fuzzies and bob-ombs. Your reward is coins equal to the time remaining times 10. It's nice that one game is luck-based and the other skill-based, but you're better off just playing jump attack and resetting until you hit the jackpot. Then there are 2 little side quests that each reward you with a badge. After chapter 3, Merlin appears outside his house and tells you to run around the red palm tree and dry outpost. Do that, and this dry will tell you to spin jump in Merlin's house 3 times. After doing so, you'll get the quick change badge. And then there's the pop diva in Club 64 who can't sing anymore. If you take the master poet's lyrics to the master composer in dry outpost, he'll give you the melody, which is so moving that the pop diva starts singing again and gives you the attack effects D badge. You've got little oinks here as well. These cute little piggies can be purchased for 10 coins each and hatched from eggs. They come in 10 variations and you can have up to 10 of them in their pasture. As soon as the 11th little oink enters the pasture, the first one runs off, leaving behind an item. You can then enter the pasture to get this item, but that'll cause every other little oink to run off. Truly the risk of the egg. These little guys are the only renewable source of ultra shrooms, jamming jellies, and repel gels in the game. Wacka, who lives on Mount Rugged, can be beaten with a hammer to acquire Wacka bumps, which are some of the best healing items in the game. Of course, neither me nor my girlfriend ever did this because that's simply cruel. The last of the optional content, and by far my favorite, is Taste Tea's recipes. You can give this kind old lady ingredients and she'll make you meals for free. This is one of those things that's really fun as a kid, but kind of frustrating looking back. Seeing as you're only told how to make a few recipes, this whole mechanic requires a lot of trial and error. And when you succeed, you just have to remember the recipe, as there's no way to access a list of them. What I ended up doing was just pulling up a list of Taste Tea recipes and min-maxing from there. Is it cheating? I don't care if it is. So what min-maxing can you do? Well, if you cook a Volt Shroom, purchased for 10 coins from Harry's shop, you get a Hot Shroom, which deals 15 HP and 5 FP, more than a Super Shroom, which costs twice as much from the same store. You can then sell the Hot Shroom for 15 coins, creating infinite money. You can also make a Life Shroom for effectively 5 coins by cooking a mushroom with a Koopa leaf to make a Volt Shroom, then cook the Volt Shroom with another Koopa leaf. Then there's the Overkill Jelly Ultra that heals 50 HP and 50 FP, and the Super Overkill Jelly Pop that heals 64 FP, which you can't even have unless you equip all 3 FP plus badges. In practice, making a lot of these meals is more trouble than it's worth, as the game is not hard enough to justify creating sweet shrooms. But if you have a ridiculous amount of brain rot, you can spend 30 minutes of your life cooking super strong heals in a children's video game. So what about this game clicked for me in my little 5-year-old brain? Why did I love it so much? Well, the combat was easy enough for me to understand, yet hard enough that a lot of bosses, namely Huffin and the Crystal King, still kicked my ass. And the action commands prevented me from getting bored. The narrative was straightforward, and each chapter was short enough to hold my attention. The puzzles and platforming were simple, and the game didn't hold my hand, which made me feel clever when I figured stuff out on my own. It was fun running around, hitting blocks, and finding secrets. Although I did have my dad print out this map of Forever Forest from the internet because for the life of me I could not get through it. I loved going through Boo's mansion and felt like a certifiable genius when I solved the extremely easy puzzle dungeon. I loved running in and out of Shy Guy's toy box, progressing by having the townsfolk help me out. I loved running errands for Koopa Koot. I loved the little oinks. Chapter 3 terrified me through and through. Bootler gives you a little jump scare at the start of the chapter. Forever Forest is scary when you're 5. Boo's mansion theme is spooky. There's another jump scare. Chandeliers fall on you. Then Tubba Blubba eats Stanley, and of course Tubba Blubba chases you at the end. A very scary chapter all around when you're a child. But the biggest thing, and the thing I've purposefully ignored up until now, is the game's character and charm. I loved every little facet about the world Paper Mario creates. Everywhere you go is fresh and exciting, and you're constantly encountering memorable characters. The writing in this game is top-notch as well. Bowser's characterization is brilliant, and Luigi's dorky presence is endearing. Entering the hidden basement in Mario's house and reading Luigi's secret diary is great. You run into Goombario's family in Toad Town out of the blue one day. The letters Mario and his partners receive are completely optional to read, yet are nice little pieces of world building. The world is cartoonish and easily digestible for a little kid. The actions you take are so grounded yet rife with children's logic. Obviously, you have to put the toy train back in the toy box so you can then ride the train in the toy box. Obviously, you need to hit the evil cloud-making Puff machine with your hammer so it breaks and the sun can go back into the sky. Obviously, the real Bombette is the one who doesn't speak with strange punctuation. Because of the simple yet highly creative events that constantly transpire, the world feels alive. The game's funny too. Tricking Buzzer by saying you're Luigi, Bowser being all pouty that he wasn't invited to the quiz show, Gourmet Guy going ham after eating cake, the Koopa Bros being locked in their own prison after beating them, Junior Troopa's entire character, him swimming across the ocean and starting the fight with half health, being able to hammer him after beating him being frozen in ice, him charging the Koopa Bros in Bowser's castle, him getting lost in Forever Forest. He's just a silly, goofy guy. Koopa Koot only gives you 1 coin for most of his favors, which is a cute little joke about old people not understanding inflation. Goomba returns Koopa Koot's tape of unknown material. None of it is like laugh out loud funny, but if this were a show on Netflix, it would definitely have the irreverent tag. Practically every NPC has a name and background. Yes, they're a little one note, but as a child, I love that there were rarely any Welcome to Corneria type characters. And because you're constantly coming back to Toad Town, the characters there develop and have different dialogue as the game progresses. The design of the characters were bright and interesting to me. Yeah, you got your bland, basic Toads, but then there's the fat bartender, the scaredy cat guard, the master, the conductors, the dryites, whose design I'm not sure is offensive or not, Rusty, Mint Tea, Tasty, the composer and poet, the pop diva, they all stand out. Then there's Koopas, Boos, Yoshis, Bubobs, this ugly guy, these dopey flowers, Chuck Quizmo and his cute assistant Vanity, Ralph and his kid, Merlin's extended family, the Ninjas, Penguins, bro, Mayor Penguin? What are his politics, his policies? What platform does he run on? Is he fiscally responsible? How many terms has he served? Who's eligible to vote in the Penguin elections? Everywhere you go, you run into fun, unique characters. Rip Cheeto and Chet Rippo are among my favorites, just because of their properly sleazy demeanor. But of course, the creme de la creme, the piece de resistance in Paper Mario character design is none other than good old Professor Colorado. I love this goofy British Koopa. He says silly things, leads incredible expeditions to the far corners of the Mushroom Kingdom, and is generally just a great character. He alone made Mount Lavalava such an enjoyable area as a child. Running into him throughout the entire game made me grow fond of him and turned the British explorer into a favorite character archetype of mine. At the end of the day, the main reason I loved Paper Mario is there was something always happening. Kent C. Koopa showing up, running into Chuck Quizmo, being able to explore more of Toad Town tunnels, Ralph having new badges in stock, simply going to new locations every few hours. It kept my attention because something new was constantly being thrown at me, and I didn't have to do any one thing for more than a few hours. Great for when your attention span is very short. Yet at the same time, the new events were spaced out so that I was never overwhelmed by a million things to do all of a sudden. It was one of my favorite games as a child, probably my favorite until I played Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Its charm, wit, and general design philosophies had a stronger impact on me than any other media I consumed around the same time. What did my girlfriend think of Paper Mario? I just gushed about one of my most treasured childhood games, so what did a newcomer think about this 20-year-old relic? Well, I'm happy to say she loved it. She absolutely adored the game, for many of the same reasons I did. The main thing, of course, was that the game was cute. She liked the art style, the characters, and the different areas. She liked the game's story and writing, found them to be both interesting and funny, but didn't like talking to NPCs. If they weren't required to progress to the story, she didn't care to talk to them, which I thought was an interesting duality. Chapter 6 was her favorite just because she thought Flower Fields was visually appealing. She liked the combat, as the action commands kept it fresh. That being said, the part of the prologue before Twink gives you access to action commands was kind of a slog for her, which is fair. Paper Mario's combat without action commands is kinda lame. She liked the bosses and the puzzle element that each of them had. She liked the Princess Peach interludes, and solving puzzles and finding stuff made her feel clever. However, baking the cake irritated her so much. She likes cooking and baking and all that stuff, and apparently the way Peach goes about making the cake is entirely wrong. She starts with sugar and eggs in a bowl.
Yeah.
That's not right, right?
I mean, like, technically you could do that. If you were, like, making a really, like, light cake, you could fold in, like, egg whites.
Okay, but she puts in the whole egg. I mean, presumably she cracks it before putting it in, but she does put the...
She does the whole
shell
egg
and
with
all.
sugar and eggs. But, like, so far, I'm not, like, freaked out about it.
Right.
And then at the same time...
She mixes it immediately.
Yeah, she mixes it immediately, which is fine. That, like, you would whip that, I guess.
Okay.
And
And then
then
she puts
just
flour and butter in.
Flour and butter, which is where it starts to go off the walls. First of all, sure, okay, let's put butter in next, whatever. But flour and butter together, you're gonna have a lumpy mess.
Right. But
Yeah.
but didn't you say this is like a dry thing?
My issue with this is that it's just like combining multiple methods of like cake making. So like just getting so it's just like a nothing cake. Like no method of cake making is like this. Like because you could like I said, you could whip sugar and egg whites beforehand and then mix them in at the end, like give a light airy texture to it. That's not what she does. You could like reverse cream where you put all your dry ingredients in, which let's also talk about the dry ingredients. Only flour. No salt. Like no leaveners, like no baking soda, baking powder, nothing.
Right.
Just flour. Like it's gonna be a bland cake. No even like vanilla extract, nothing. But anyway, so she's not even reverse creaming either.
She's put in egg, flour, sugar, and butter.
Yeah, and that's the whole cake recipe. Also, all these ingredients just sitting out on the table.
Okay, well, eggs can sit out.
Sure, eggs can sit out, but not milk.
And then 30 seconds probably isn't long enough to bake a cake.
No, also I have to guess 30 seconds. Like there's no timers in the Mushroom Kingdom.
Not in Peach's Castle.
I guess. But apparently also they have non-stick pans because like she didn't grease that or nothing.
And then she just puts cream and strawberry on.
Yeah, pre-whipped cream that again just sitting out on the table.
Just like Cool Whip.
Cool. Even Cool Whip is supposed to be refrigerated.
Cool Whip and strawberry. Okay. Thank you for your input.
Yeah.
There were a couple of parts that stumped her, though. She didn't think asking Sheik his favorite food in Chapter 2 would be important, because I had shown her how Chat Repo messes with you and thought that question was a red herring. She also didn't think to use Bo to access Shy Guy's toy box, instead thinking she had to chase the Shy Guy that enters the empty building and then runs off. Some of the platforming was hard for her too, but in her defense, the jumping is a little stiff in this game, and there were a few mechanics she just didn't find useful. Goombario, for one, she didn't use at all. She didn't think his tattle ability was helpful, and partners like Bombette were just more pragmatic choices. With very few exceptions, she didn't care about badges. When leveling up, she thought HP and FP were more important than BP, and as a result, really only used the Quick Change, Flower Saver, and Quake Hammer badges. And because she didn't really use badges, the entire Star Piece mechanic wasn't of use to her. As a result, she didn't care about delivering letters and doing Chuck Quizmo's quizzes. The other optional stuff, the dojo, Can't See Koopa, Anti-Guy, and Koopa Koot's errands, weren't of interest to her because the reward for doing it was either non-existent or of minimal use, which is honestly fair. Most of this game's rewards feed back into getting new badges, and if you don't use badges, there's no point in seeking them out. Looking back on it, this game holds up incredibly well. Paper Mario is a top-notch game worthy of being played in current year. Its gameplay, while simplistic, offers unique spins on the typical RPG. Partners and badges and action commands keep things fresh. It controls pretty alright too. Running and jumping feels good for the most part. A little stiff sometimes, yet far from unplayable. But really, the main draw of this game is its writing. The world that Paper Mario creates is so creative and endearing. The overall plot is kinda but it really serves as a vehicle to let you explore distant lands and interact with fun characters. It is an adorable game. Now let's go over some things I noticed and liked but didn't really fit anywhere. A lot of these I observed while watching my girlfriend play. I like the general feel of the game's translation. I don't know how to best put it, but Junior Chupa being the boss of a neighborhood gang, Rusty talking about the Shy Guy language, Cammy Koopa implying the Mushroom Kingdom treats Koopas poorly, and the Bob-ombs working for the Koopa Bros all give the game a fast and loose approach when it comes to throwing out information. Because what did the Koopa Bros do before Bowser gave them power? Run a business? What work were the Bob-ombs doing? The game isn't worried about just establishing something and then never bringing it back up. I like that. The lasting repercussions of Shy Guys having their own language isn't something Paper Mario cares about. I like how the fuzzy battle in Chapter 1 is a good introduction into how Kooper can effectively deal with all ground enemies. I like how Dry Outpost sells cheap items so you don't need to give Sheik the good stuff when getting information. You can just give him dusty hammers and dried shrooms. I like how the walls Bombette blows up and Dry ruins leave little piles of rubble. I like how each of the stone chops attack you in different ways. I like how the Clubbas encourage you to use bow to avoid them, on account of their high HP and attack, and the fact that they come in groups of 3 or 4. I like how, starting with the Chapter 4 Peach interlude, the game doesn't make you walk down this hallway, it just skips it altogether. I like how these plants in Jade Jungle trick you, as every one of them up until this point has been helpful. I love how Chapter 7 is just the Among Us chapter, dealing with sus imposters. I like how the star point system ensures you're never under or over leveled. By dynamically giving you more or less star points, you never have to grind, a rarity in RPGs. However, no game bats 1,000, and I'd like to go through some elements that I didn't really care for. Starting off, narratively, the chapter bosses are kind of 50-50. Some of them are really strong, developed characters which make their fights climatic and carry weight to them, whereas others just kind of come out of nowhere. 2 bosses that really shine on account of their development are the Koopa Bros and Tubba Blubba. The Koopa Bros, introduced during the prologue and shown to have a super secret move, are a constant thorn in Mario's side throughout Chapter 1. They block entry to Pleasant Path, hide keys, trap Mario in a prison cell, and fire cannons at him. As Mario storms their fortress, they are doing all they can to protect their star spirit, which creates a real showdown when you finally fight them. Tubba Blubba is introduced during the Princess Peach interlude after Chapter 2. 2 guards speak of his invincibility and supposed secret weakness. The next thing you learn about him comes from Lady Bo, who informs you that Tubba Blubba has been eating her ghost buddies. Soon after, you encounter him in Gusty Gulch and watch him meet Stanley the Boo. In his castle, you once more run into him just outside his bedroom and have to hide from him. Then, after stealing Yaki the key, he gives chase as he flees his castle. Through all this showdown against Tubba Blubba has incredibly high stakes. Of course, the true chapter boss was Tubba Blubba's heart, as Tubba Blubba can be beaten in a turn or 2, but the point still stands. For the opposite effect, take General Guy, my favorite boss in the game. There is nothing said about him. He's not mentioned in passing, we know nothing. He just suddenly pops up at the end of Chapter 4. It's still a fun fight, but because we don't know General Guy, there's no weight to it. He's just some schmuck in a uniform. Not every chapter boss needs to be as developed as the Koopa Bros or Tubba Blubba, but even just a few mentions to General Guy would help provide some context and raise the stakes for when we finally fight him. Huffin Puff is a perfect example of this. We don't see him before the fight, but he's constantly referenced by his minions, making him out to be this diabolical cloud aficionado. This next complaint is a little neurotic, so please bear with me. Because the game creates the expectation that you will not so subtly be told where you need to go next, the post-Chapter 6 section becomes particularly confusing. The Princess Peach interlude offers no leads and you have no idea where to go next, except you might have remembered this bed of spikes and Toad Town tunnels that Lakilester can take you across, giving you access to the Ultra Boots. They let you cross this gap, leading you to a suspicious blue door, but it's locked. Not like every other locked door that requires a key to open, but a fully locked, inaccessible door. So what do? Obviously, you run to Merlin the Wizard to trigger a cutscene that opens the door for you. I'm sure I'm making it out to be a bigger issue than it really is, but the only other time you have to talk to Merlin to progress the story was back in the prologue, and you were told to do so there. I think the solution here would just be a quick little cutscene of the Ninja entering Merlin's house as you come back to Toad Town, like when the shopkeeper runs out of the item store in Dry Outpost. But wah, I'm baby, let's move on. While I generally enjoy the concept of star pieces and the process of acquiring them, there's just too darn many of them. There's 160. I've mentioned everyone's favorite weird worm trivia guy, Chuck Quizmo, and how you get a star piece for every question of his you answer correctly. Now, how many questions do you think Chuck Quizmo asks? 10? 20? Maybe 25. Try 64. You'll have to answer 64 of his questions if you want all the star pieces in this game. What makes this exceptionally tedious is that he disappears after each question, meaning you'll have to find him again. But because he doesn't always appear where you go, you'll be hard-pressed to even come close to answering all his questions in a normal playthrough. In my girlfriend's playthrough, she only ran into Chuck Quizmo 9 times, and in my super neurotic near 100% playthrough, I only ran into him 21 times. 36 star pieces are found by just randomly spin jumping. Sure, a couple of spots look a little suspicious, such as the place where Mario falls in Goomba Village and the stone cactus in Dry Desert, but most of them are entirely arbitrary. You can ask Merlovely to locate them, and there's this badge Ralph gives you that indicates if you're in a room with a hidden panel, but the whole mechanic is a little silly. If there was a slight discoloration to the panel or some other sign, then it would be about observation, but otherwise it just feels like bombing walls in the original Legend of Zelda. Beyond that, Koopa Koot gives 15 star pieces for completing favors, and this creep ripped Cheeto sells 3 at the price of 64 coins each. But really, 160 is just too many. It makes finding one feel less special, as when you need 25 star pieces to buy a single badge, the goal seems unattainable. If there had been 100 or 120 instead, you could cut down on Chuck Quizmo's questions and the inflated nature by which Koopa gives you star pieces, and then finding them would feel more impactful. Unfortunately, or fortunately depending on your priorities, Paper Mario's combat is pretty easily broken. Yeah, it's a kid's game and I'm an adult, it's bound to be easy, but even my girlfriend, despite it being her first turn-based RPG she's ever played, managed to break it pretty soundly. All you gotta do is get Bombette Super Ranked, grab the Quake Hammer badge and Mount Rugged, and you can pretty much beat any battle in just one turn. Then if you get Bombette Ultra Ranked and grab the Mega Quake badge, you can still easily beat most fights in Chapter 8 in a single turn. Sure, that's 15 FP a fight, but if you put on both Flower Saver badges, which each decrease FP cost by 1, you're down to 11. And if there's no flying enemies, you can just use Power Bomb, requiring only 9 FP a battle. I really hate that my brain rot is so severe I can't enjoy the fun strategies badges let you accomplish. Lowering enemies' defense, putting them to sleep, regenerating HP and FP. It would all be so fun if there wasn't a more effective strategy. In my personal playthrough, I made this even more efficient. 2 power pluses, all or nothing, D down P up, and Mega Quake made me damn near unstoppable. Even half the special moves are rather obsolete. The only ones both my girlfriend and I consistently used were Refresh, Starstorm, and Smooch. Yeah, lowering attack and putting enemies to sleep is cool, but rushing damage is just the better strategy. This by no means is an issue exclusive to Paper Mario, and instead is more of a problem that plagues the RPG genre, but it's worth bringing up nonetheless. Take the Puff Machine mini-boss in Chapter 6 for instance. My girlfriend beat it by just using Starstorm twice. Think harder, not smarter. The Flower Saver badges, while tied for costing the most BP, are 2 of the best, as by putting them on you can carelessly use attacks that cost a lot of FP. Because it applies to both Mario and his partners, many moves that would otherwise be saved for tough fights can be used whenever you want. The Quick Change badge you get after Chapter 3 is another pretty broken one. At the cost of a mere 4 BP, you get to freely swap your partner, something that typically takes a turn to do. What this means in practice is that you are never punished for having the wrong partner out, making every battle much easier. The most broken badge, though, is Power Bounce. You jump on an enemy until you mess up the action command, with the damage decreasing by 1 each bounce. Put that bad boy on, charge a few turns with the Super Jump Charge badge, and you can easily one-shot bosses. Am I a better person for min-maxing a 20-year-old game this hard? No. Does it feel amazing? Absolutely. It's also really frustrating how your partners can take damage, which just renders them out of commission for X number of turns. Only a few enemies can injure them in the first place, but it's obnoxious regardless. Outside of battles, some of the partners just have very limited use as well. Lakilester only has 3 uses in the entire game. Once in Flower Fields, once in Toad Town Tunnels, and once in Bowser's Castle. At that point, why have him at all? His role is basically just what Parakarry does, but over larger gaps. Watt also only has 3 required uses, but at least she can find hidden items. I also find that none of the partners are particularly interesting or fleshed out. Once you finish their little quest and they join your party, they're all but silent, not offering any insight or input into any cutscene or conversation. Goombario is by far the most fleshed out, but that's because he's the only one that actually speaks for most of the game through his tattle ability. Kooper's brave and wants to be an archaeologist. Bombette worked at the Koopa Bros fortress, but blew up the Koopa Bros due to poor working conditions, making her based in proletariat pilled. She also has this weird toxic ex-boyfriend named Bruce who won't stop blowing himself up until Bombette comes back to him. Red flag much? Parakarry delivers mail but is bad at his job. Lady Bo is part of the bourgeoisie and so probably doesn't get along with Bombette. Watt is here and has a mother. Sushi babysits for the Yoshis and her daughter is expecting a child. That's exciting. Lakilester is a bad boy turned good who has a cute GF. So while they're all fun to look at, none of the partners really feel like characters. Like, can you tell me anything about Watt? She comes out of nowhere and is just hanging out in Shy Guy's toy box at the end of the game. At best, the partners are just tools tied to progression, used to overcome roadblocks. Really, all of these are just minor nitpicks, ones that I only noticed after having played this game countless times. Paper Mario has stood the test of time and is as good now as it was when I played it as a child. It achieves this by never dwelling for too long on any one idea or scenario, instead always introducing new ideas, mechanics, and characters. It has so much going on at any given time, and the depth given to offhanded mechanics, such as Koopa favors, cooking, and the Lil Oink farm, shows the dedication and love that was put into this game. The first console I ever got was a Nintendo 64. I was 4 at the time, and for reference this was in 2004. My dad purchased the system off eBay and it came with about a dozen games. Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing that didn't work, Yoshi's Story, Mario Party 2, The World Is Not Enough, GoldenEye 007, and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Then, sometime later, my dad bought Paper Mario. I remember the excitement of it coming in the mail and ripping open the FedEx package. I wasn't able to play it until tomorrow night, and I could barely focus in school the next day, as all I could think about was playing my new game. When I got home, I rushed to the room we had above our garage, which my family called the apartment, the room I'm editing this video in right now, to play my new game on the old CRT TV that would make a high-pitched buzz after being on for too long. I still have that system in the cartridge, and even the controller I used. I'm not sure what happened to the old TV. The controller's analog stick is loose to the left because of Bo's smack ability. That old cartridge has 3 save files, none of which I think are the original one I played as a kid. Patrick 9, Patrick 6, and Diesel, a stupid ironic nickname I gave myself in high school. Patrick 9 had made it to Shiver City, while the other 2 were right before the final battle. Diesel is notable because I must have min-maxed that file super hard, on account of having 5 deluxe feasts, far more than that game requires. Both Patrick 6 and Diesel have the diploma and the gold credit, while Patrick 9 was struggling along with 5 mushrooms. What my girlfriend and I played on was the Wii Virtual Console, which is where my dad and I repurchased quite a few Nintendo 64 games we already had. In the coming years, I would get a GameCube, a DS, and a Wii, and I would begin to play video games on the first floor of my house, as the apartment gets hot in the summer and cold in the winter. But I would occasionally return to brave the unpleasant temperature just to play on the Nintendo 64, the holy grail of which was Paper Mario. Returning to this game for the first time in several years, I had a great time. While nostalgia is a powerful force, even without it, the game is still fun to play 20 years later. Watching my girlfriend play it for the first time, while a little frustrating at points, offered good insight into how this game operates. But really, I'm happy to say that the Paper Mario I played in 2022 is nearly identical to the Paper Mario I played in 2004. Because while that one, the one I played 18 years ago, no longer exists, memories of it always will.